This is the Skeena, spelled S-K-E-E-N-A, River. I said river, not a lake. It is big, wide, probably deep, moving quite fast in some locations, fed by countless what are called up here creeks, which in Wyoming would be called, other than the Snake and the Green and so forth, rivers. If you can believe it, this is a river. This is Prince Rupert as seen from the mall in Rupert. The little building down there is the railroad museum. The quiet peacefulness of this British Columbia inlet from the Pacific Ocean belies the tremendous industry and activity that would have begun to take place here in 1899, when beneath these steep and fog-shrouded mountains this fish hatchery was first built. At that time, it was peopled by 4 labor groups: Euro-Canadians, i.e. people from Europe, white; Chinese; Japanese; and local Native Canadians, or Aborigines, or Indians. These are some of the fishing boats apparently that were used. Probably not at that time. These seem to be more sophisticated than would have been perhaps available then. I'm not sure. It's clear that this has been in use for a long time, as you can see from the metal roof that has covered the much earlier shake roofs. This was one of 200 canneries in this area, this broad area, obviously taking advantage of the fish in the Skeena River, a major river system, a major river, and access to the Pacific Ocean. And the flow of the North Pacific Current from Japan in a clockwise direction to southeast Alaska and this part of British Columbia, providing basically warm water and an upwelling, I believe, where fish would thrive. What we'll see inside as well as here outside was a transition between technology in its primitive state, its fledgling, searching state, and the high tech of this industry. This represents, if you can notice it, an elevator device that probably was the zenith of technology for lifting the huge weights of fish from the scows or boats that brought them in up to the dock level where they could then proceed to processing. No doubt an earlier device would have been this kind of winching system here, or the one we can see right there, slight orange color just to the left of that post, which would have lifted perhaps large boxes or bales of fish from the scows to the deck here. Inside we will see other forms of technology and the eventual complexity of even this deteriorated and abandoned hatchery. This room is filled with pieces of equipment, engines, generators, tables, perhaps for lunching employees. All of this has been retained and hopefully will be restored in existing lines, cannery lines, production lines. And it's sometime the hope of this restoration that they will in fact have a full cannery line in operation for the tourist. What we saw moments ago is the original manual way of making cans. These three machines reflect, apparently at the time, the zenith in the making of cans. Its primary benefit was that it took flat cans and reformed them on site. This allowed, quite simply, a greater efficiency and lower cost of shipping, in that flat cans shipped in their round configuration, such as this one we see here on top of the machine, only a small number of those could be shipped per box, whereas from Vancouver, many times as much, 3 or 4 times as many, at least in the flat form, could be shipped. By placing them in this machine and reforming them into round cans, considerable efficiency in cost and time was achieved. Ask yourself how dangerous these machines would be to work around. What does this tell you about employee safety and employer concern for employee safety? These round devices that you see right in the center of the film, or the video, contained belts, or held belts, like this one here, if you will. This is a narrow, thin belt, this one right here. But all the time that you're working around these machines, remember that these belts are moving at a very high speed, driven by engines the size of the one that you see in the back. No doubt quite capable of ripping off a finger, a hand, or an arm. These were dangerous places to work. This display will give us some idea of what the products were, what the fish and other wildlife were, that justified this tremendous industry. The halibut, with an eye on the side of its body because it lay on the water, on the bottom of the ocean flat. The sea otter in the lower left-hand corner. Correction, the seal. The crab. Look at the unique coral. In this restoration project, there is great pride in the techniques used, primarily the netting of fish. But it is exactly this technique that you see here called gill-net fishing. In which nets, sometimes 20 miles in length, are dragged by giant trawlers, catching all kinds of fish in the net itself. Fish that the fishermen cannot even use. It is there that the controversy arises. Remember that fishing in the late 1800s, like so much else in this country, was believed to be a resource that was inexhaustible. Man could not use it all, no matter how hard he tried. It has only been today, in the last 20 or 30 years, that human beings, or at least some, have come to realize that there are very demanding limits on what man can steal from nature. An interesting display, if you have not yet seen one, was the Indian dugout canoe. This canoe is 15 feet long, but some canoes were as long as 60 feet. They were made by hollowing out the center, then starting fires to further hollow it out, and filling it with water and hot stones to create steam that would make the wood pliable, allowing them to put in horizontal thwarts and thereby widen the canoe. This factory was in great measure very much like the company town or the company stores that we have read about in industry at large, and that it contained all resources for this area. Euro-Americans, or Euro-Canadians rather, would have had their own homes, somewhat elegant in comparison to the Chinese bunkhouses. The Chinese were not allowed to bring their families. The Japanese had less pretentious homes, and the Indians lived in their own Indian village. This was the Japanese bunkhouse built in 1930. And as a sign says nearby, the various racial communities, such as the Japanese, lived and worked in their own segregated centers. The building was constructed in the 1930s when the industrious Japanese fishermen and boat builders developed a more permanent relationship within the North Pacific community. One has to wonder if that last phrase is not extremely pregnant with ideas and racial innuendos not spoken. Those of the least prestige lived farthest away from the cannery itself, i.e. down where we have just been. As we get further on here, the more pretentious homes are those accorded to the manager, the assistant manager, the head line man, the net boss,